You know, basketball is kind of a hard sport to accurately reproduce with cards and dice. Seriously, how do you expect to take a sport that looks like this and get it to work using cards like these? Now, it might surprise you to find out just how many really good tabletop basketball sims are out there. But of course, most people stop once they get to the best known company, which is Stratamatic. You've almost certainly heard of Stratamatic before. The company's baseball game has been going strong for well over 60 years now and shows no sign of stopping. Well, Stratamatic's game might not be the best baseball game on the market, that's pretty subjective, but it's certainly one of the most well established, and they do other sports too. Stratamatic football has been a staple since the late 1960s, and then there's the hockey game, which is technically the baby of the bunch. But the basketball game, StratOMatic Basketball, is considered by its fans to be the best of the lot. Well, I'm not so sure if I agree with the idea that the basketball game is the best of all the Stratamatic games, but then again, I haven't really played enough with it to judge. You can let me know what you think in the comments. Now, what you might not realize about StratOMatic's basketball game is that it's actually the second version of the game. Do a simple search on eBay for StratOMatic Basketball and you're bound to come across games like this one. It doesn't really matter when you do this search, these games will always be available. You'll see the red box version and the yellow box version, and you'll probably wonder what in the world the difference is between the two. Now, the truth here is that there's a huge difference between the two games. They're not really compatible with each other. In other words, the cards are not compatible at all, and you can't really buy one game and expect cards or other things from the other game to work with it. And yeah, there's a long story behind all of this. Well, first we need to go back to July 1973. To be specific, we need to go look at the old Stratamatic Review magazine. So the Stratamatic Review was a fan-produced strat-focused magazine. It was sort of the Stratamatic equivalent to the APA Journal. I'm not sure who the editor was, since the magazine doesn't have a lot of that publishing information you usually get from formal magazines. However, I do know that it was apparently printed up in Detroit. Let me know if you have more information. Anyway, this July 1973 issue is the earliest one I've found with information about the Strat basketball game. As is usually the case with Stratomatic games, the game featured an easy-to-play basic version as well as an advanced version. Well, let's look at the old basic game first. This game was clearly designed to be a two-player game. You would consult the old referral chart first to get the results of the jump ball. If you're familiar with the current Stratomatic game, this chart will seem familiar. It seems to be the same jump ball chart that the current game offers. I'm not sure if anybody's tried to create a more complex jump ball system for Stratomatic. If you ask me, this is actually laughably simple, and it's the only game that I know of that has a generic jump ball system. Even the most advanced version of the game uses the same chart. Anyway, in the old basic game, the offensive coach would secretly choose a player to shoot the ball, for example, Fred Carter. The defensive coach would secretly decide whether to double team a certain player or just play man-to-man. And then you would roll the dice. In the old Stratomatic tradition, the white die would tell you whether the result came from the offense or the defense. A 1, 2, or 3 meant that the offensive player got the shot. A 4, 5, or 6 meant that you would look at the team defense card. There were no individual defensive cards in this version. You then add the other two dice together to figure out what row to look at. Now look at Fred Carter's card. You can see that there is one set of results for man-to-man and another one for when he's being double-teamed. Anything that says X is a made shot, which should also sound familiar. Anything blank would be a missed shot, and then you have a few specialized situations. Now, a missed shot meant that the other team got the ball. Sometimes, though, you would get one of these shot-missed rebound situation results. Now, each player has a rebounding rating located in this section of his card. You're supposed to keep a running team rebounding total for all 5 guys you have on the court. Think about like APA Baseball's team index rating. So when you need a rebound, you compare the rebound totals between the two teams and look at this rebounding chart. It tells you to draw a split card or roll a 20-sided die and whether the team with the highest or lowest rebounding total will win the ball. Each player also has an individual defensive rating from 1, which is bad, to 4, which is good. Sometimes you would consult this defensive rating chart. You look at the rating, you draw a split card or roll a 20-sided die and get the result here. And honestly, that's about it. It's like a super basic version of the Strat basketball game. It's much more basic than today's basic game. You can see, though, that a lot of the modern Strat game really comes from this one. And now let's take a quick look at the old advanced game. So this is the version that uses these plastic pawns. Now, if you look closely at the board, you'll notice that there are different places you can put the pawn, close or back. There were also options for double teaming. So the way that this worked is that you would choose whether to play each individual defensive player back or close, and you'd move the pawns up or back to show that on the board. You could also essentially trap the defensive center inside on offense by putting a big man inside. In the current game, of course, that's more of a team defensive option. The older game also still had the system of having the offensive team call the player to take the shot. The current game, in contrast, is largely driven directly by the fast action cards. Now, as you can imagine, there's actually a reason that Hal Richmond completely revamped the basketball game. Well, let's take a look back at some of the controversies surrounding the older version of the game. The first one is obvious. The old game only offered the NBA. Remember that the game came out in summer 1973, and that was during the height of the ABA. APA's basketball game was borderline unplayable and totally a mess, but at least APA offered ABA cards. And the truth is that the decision not to offer the ABA was pretty unpopular with a number of the company's customers. My guess is that Hal Richmond didn't know what to do with things like the three-point shot or the generally faster pace of play that the ABA offered. You see, the first version of Strat Basketball is very much a half-court game. The design is almost like a half-court pickup game. There's no fast break option at all, and it's more of a coach's game, think like a Dean Smith type basketball game, than anything else. The old claim that the basketball game could be played in less than 60 minutes was also clearly not true. There was also some confusion in the early days about whether single-player rules would be included. These were apparently written and placed in the game at the last minute, leading to all sorts of confusion. Well, we like to think of the 60s and 70s as some sort of golden age of tabletop gaming, but based on what I've read and heard, it seems to me like most of the people playing these games were playing them one player. It's incredible that Strat could have even conceived of designing a game with no single-player option. Now, I know that Richmond's playtesting was always multiplayer, but surely he must have understood his customer base, right? It took a little less than a year for criticism of the old basketball game to come out. The biggest problem gamers cited was the lack of dribbling options, not fast break options, interestingly enough. The players noted that a majority of centers had exactly the same results on the original cards, and that big men were not rated separately for their abilities to draw fouls. Anyway, people came up with foul charts like this one to create a more sensible fouling system. Before the second season of cards came out, StratOMatic revised the game, adding in a simplified system where the little white die would determine which player would shoot the ball. And I think that this is likely where the genesis of the modern game comes from, with the control ratings on the fast action cards and all that jazz. Now, I should note that there were fast action cards with the original game. However, instead of dictating play, the fast action cards indicated passes, so-called percentage shots, and a few other odds and ends. Those odds and ends included the so-called split numbers, which went from 1 to 20, a feature still in the current basketball game. You see, the baseball game went away from that split number card system sometime in the 1980s. They started to use a Dungeons & Dragons style 20-sided die. The basketball game, however, keeps the card system alive today. I can sort of see why, since it's basketball. This system means that you're not rolling the dice all that often, which really helps with the pace of the game. However, it is pretty interesting that the basketball game has not really adapted to the new technology available to the company. The new version of the basketball game was inevitable when the NBA introduced the three-point shot in 1979. StratOMatic tried to create a three-point outside shooting option for the 1979-80 season cards, but it was awkward. It required the defender to be playing back, and it didn't really make much sense. And so in July 1981, StratOMatic revealed a completely revamped basketball game. It's actually really interesting to read this today. The special six-sided die, the fast action card system, and all the rest are exactly the same as today's game. Nothing has changed in almost 45 years. Now, if you look at clips of the NBA from the early 1980s, it's obvious why the fast break was such an important addition. Well, that flair, which was a holdover from the ABA days, meant that there were teams that basically would fast break at every possible opportunity. And of course, it was awkward to play with a fast break system if you were using a chiefly dice-activated system. Fast breaks are transition plays, not half-court plays, and they require a game design that allows for the game to basically play itself from time to time. And of course, the new game got strong reviews, in the magazine at least. But there's one issue that has plagued the basketball game since the beginning. That's the lack of older teams. I found this letter to the editor in the December 1981 issue of the Stratamatic Review complaining about a lack of old-time teams. and it's not hard to find people online who complain about the same problem to this day. I honestly don't think that Stratamatic as a company fully realizes that a good portion of its fan base would like to play with teams from different eras. And of course, there are some of us who are interested in mixing eras just to see what would happen. But then again, it's not entirely clear that the current game is even capable of handling modern basketball. Well, the problem, as you know, is the abundance of three-point shots that we see in today's game. There is a new rule this year that allows players to take three-point shots on a fast break in Stratamatic, something that is, of course, a major part of the current NBA. However, interestingly enough, you can find examples of teams doing this as far back as the early 90s, which makes me wonder why it took Strat so long. Well, I'm not sure if Strat will ever update the entire game or not, though I do feel that the company should at least do something. It should at least offer some love to the basketball fans, many of whom have really supported this game over the years, despite being mostly ignored by the company. Now, the game isn't bad, of course, but it's really not designed for modern basketball. There's no real way to run like a spread offense in the game. You don't see that increased movement off the ball that you see these days, and the explosion of the three-point shot is handled in a really, really awkward fashion. Anyway, that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that this game needs an overhaul? Let me know down in the comments.